So in the time we've got left, I just wanted to talk from a local authority perspective about what regulators want to know, and who does what and why we do it. So I'm just going to talk a bit about what regulators consider, and then Ray will introduce the new NCLOG guide to cover systems that came out last year. So I'm a local authority contaminated land officer. I've been doing this for about 30 years now. And we're often involved right at the start of projects, particularly when they come up for development. We also have responsibilities under Part 2A of the Environmental Protection Act, but the bulk of our work seems to be through the planning system. We'll work with warranty providers like NHBC as well, and the EA, who have the responsibility for protection of controlled waters, but they are working under really stretched resources, as are we. And so quite often the local authority contaminated land officer is going to be the first screen for these types of sites. So we're interested really to know initially in your day-to-day work how well you know your local regulator and if you know how to get in touch. I don't know, Ray, if you can. Oh, there we go. There's our first poll. So just generally, do you know how to get in touch with your regulator? We'll just leave that for a short while. So it's looking like quite a few people. We've got around 75%. So around 3/4 of people are happy getting in touch with their regulator, and a quarter of people can't. So we'd be interested to find out how we can solve that. I think quite often local authority people are working as a consultee through the planning process, and replies will only come that way, and sometimes we are kind of behind a bit of a wall. So we'd be interested in your thoughts in how we can rectify that, because I think these early talks are often what solves a lot of problems. Okay, so we'll end that poll. Thank you. So basically, what do we want? This is what we're aiming for, a safe and healthy place to live or work, quite simple requirements really, but we're also following what's in National Planning Policy Framework for sites to be safe and suitable for use. We'll follow the approach in land contamination risk management. And we're also looking to see, as a contaminated land officer, whether any conditions have been met that have been placed on planning permission. And then once those conditions are discharged, that obviously helps to release funds for lending and gets houses sold. So we want to be a useful part of this process. So why do we ask for what we do? Well, all the guidance is linked up now, really. This is from the planning portal. So when people are first looking at putting in for planning permission, you'll go directed to consider these things. And these are all the advantages of giving us the right information. And NPPF actually gives the definition of what a competent person is. So this information should be coming in from somebody who's competent to provide the information at each stage of the development. So there's lots of advantages. So things will be happening on time, there won't be delays, we can make decisions on applications. We'll put less conditions on planning permission as well if you come in with enough information initially. And the whole process should work a lot more smoothly and reduce the risk of you having liabilities in the future from your site. LCRM, you're expected to follow land contamination risk management. This gives you the whole framework for your risk management on contaminated land sites. And if you follow that, there's checklists in there and even a structure for your reports. So that's what will get you smoothly through planning. And it's also endorsed by lots of professional associations. There was a lot of work went into producing that guidance. And so it's relevant to people at all stages in development, particularly on brownfield sites and contaminated land. So we're kind of interested to see who we've got here today from all those different areas. So if we can launch poll 2, just to find out who's here. Kim's done one click for a product supplier. Got a hand raised. I'm not sure if that's still up. Don't know whether Matt, if you can see that, or has that gone down? Okay, so about half of you are consultants. That's interesting. Oh, we just relaunched. Oh no, there we go. Yeah, so about got half of the people are consultants. Those results have changed for me if I share those. And we've got some regulators. I think we've got a product supplier there with Kim. So it's nice to see that balance of regulators and consultants. So we're the people who should be talking together. So very quickly, what's in LCRM? This is a nice flowchart that Network Rail produced that just kind of takes you through the steps that are in LCRM. And the most important consideration is that all of these steps should be complete before you move on to the next one. And this is what will give you the evidence, the lines of evidence that you've made the right decisions and how you've ended up with whatever you decide for your cover system. So key to all this is the conceptual site model. So this is an iterative process that shows that you understand your site, what the problem is, where it's going, and what you might do about it. So this is just a nice model that's in one of the old contaminated land reports, but it basically shows how your contamination is going to be moving onto your site and affecting your receptors. So you've got these choices when you're considering, is a cover system appropriate? And here's your cover system, obviously breaking a lot of those exposure pathways. The other option, is just put your house somewhere else and turn this bit into the car park. And these considerations are really good if you can do that design stage. But they can also be one of the more sustainable solutions as well. And that's really what I wanted to focus on very quickly was that's the change that I've seen in my career, is that the solutions now are trying to be more sustainable, and that's something we've really got to focus on. And I think the big consideration is that the benefit of doing this remediation is greater than its impact. But also the benefits are environmental, social and economic as well. And this is something that runs all through LCRM now. So why do we keep going on about it? And I think this is a question that's already come up in the questions and answers is, should we be putting stuff in landfill if we can reuse it? And clearly we shouldn't, because the construction industry is a big source of waste going into landfills. It was on this example from 2018, it's around 2/3 of UK waste was coming from construction. So clearly that can't carry on. And also because we're aiming towards these sustainable development goals that obviously benefit not only humans but the whole planet. And when you look, Amy Juden from EPG pointed out that all of these sustainable development goals here that are outlined relate to our use of land and to the contaminated land industry and construction industry. So there's so many benefits from doing this one task well. And there's lots of guidance to help you as well, and new guidance emerging. And also, if you do this well, it can reduce the cost of your project. And this is from the previous government, who set out their environmental improvement plan. And there was targets in there about the new code of practice that Tim had referred to, so that's due for publication soon, and also the consideration for soil hubs and reuse depots, that should be coming out, as you know, that a lot of people have been championing for many years, and it would be really good if that can actually come into place. So when you've decided that that you need to do some work on your site, you're looking at your options, these are some of the things you might be considering. So what's the regulator requiring you to do? The people who's going to use the site, so you know, residents or whoever, what's going to be the best outcome for them. Obviously the costs, there's these sustainability requirements, and also the complexity of the site. Have you got trees, have you got slopes, those types of things. And again, we're interested to see how you would rank them. Zoom's not great for doing ranking polls, but if we launch that one, and if you score these factors just according to, I think it's 1 to 5.
So we say 1's the most important?
Yeah, so if we say 1's the most important, 5 is the least important. Thanks, Ray. So if you can just allocate some scores, it's a bit more fiddly to click through. So we've got a few people clicking away. Zoom really isn't the best tool for this, but we can see some things getting more of a weighting, and I should be able to see that if I hover over them.
I think it's quite interesting, because we've got so many regulators on the call, that regulatory requirements are very important to a lot of people.
Yeah, this is, I think we'll leave that poll running for a bit, because that's a bit more fiddly to fill in. So I think you can see my slides anyway, so that's fine. And then when people stop voting, I'll share the results of that. So once you've made those decisions based on those considerations, you'll move on to your actual options appraisal that's set out in LCRM. I think I'll end that poll now. It looks like people have mostly stopped. Yeah. There we go. So you should be able to answer this question. So is a cover system the best answer for your site? And then what type are you going to go to? And this is something that Ray will discuss in a moment. So you'll be considering what depth of cover system you need, and considering what you're going to use the site for, and also, which Tim touched on, how it's going to be planted, and your BNG considerations as well. And the little pictures down the bottom were chosen for specific reasons, obviously, because if you're planting a wildflower meadow, as you've got in the bottom left there, you need a very different soil from what you'll do if you're planting a lawn or a vegetable garden. If you're covering it in patio, then obviously you don't need to waste the best resources on shoving it underneath your patio. Or if it's just a bit of landscaping within a car park, it's something really different. So these considerations also need to be built into your options appraisal. And if you really understand the site, I think that's the point I'm making, then the answers are quite apparent. So because we were asked all these questions when people were considering cover systems, this was one of the reasons why we wanted to bring all the guidance together in the NCLOG document. So that was published last year, and Ray's going to talk a bit now about what's in there and also how it's being used and our experience of it. So thanks, Ray.
Okay. Yes, so this is a brief introduction to the NCLOG guide. I have found it really interesting listening today to the talks, particularly from Emma and Mark from the NHBC, about how the subtle differences between the requirements of regulators and the requirements from warranty providers like the NHBC. So this is a document that we produced last year, that we, NCLOG, produced last year to help regulators become more consistent and to have a consistent source of guidance. A little bit about myself. I work at Sheffield City Council, but I'm involved in regional, so YALPAG groups and national NCLOG groups as well. Click on the right thing. There we go. So NCLOG itself, the National Contaminated Land Officers Group. We're a voluntary organisation of CLOs, Contaminated Land Officers and Local Authority officers, and it aims to work with existing regional Contaminated Land Officers groups to promote best practice, technical consistency, and to be a national voice for CLOs to help us give us a little bit more heft when we're lobbying government for different things or when there are concerns that we need to speak out about. What isn't included in this document? So all of the options appraisal that Fabia has talked about, that's not part of this. This document assumes that a cover system has been chosen. It doesn't provide a number for a thickness of cover system, and it doesn't include anything new, no new information. It compiles all of the existing guidance and puts it in one easy to access place. As Emma said at the beginning, this entire training session is about simple cover system solutions, and that's true for this document as well. It primarily considers human health, and it doesn't include geotechnical issues. So if it already exists, why have we created it? Again, it's that single point of reference, consistency. The reason why it only highlights out to existing guidance and doesn't give flatline values is because it needs to allow for regional variance. So it covers all of England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and even between Yorkshire and the Northwest. We're only separated by the Pennines, but the quality of topsoil that we see coming through as regulators is incredibly different. It provides some perspective on climate change and sustainability. So a lot of these guidance documents that we're referencing out to are fairly old in terms of they were written a while ago. It's not that they're not applicable now, they just don't necessarily consider all of the new guidance on climate change and sustainability. And yeah, it just includes context for not only planning applications, but all the different things that regulators do. It is downloadable on the Clare wall, and when I finish talking, I will put a link to it in the chat. The document itself, here's a quick overview. So we take a look at the scope of the guidance, the legislative context, the primary guidance it references out to, like LCRM. We talk a little bit about establishing whether a cover system is a suitable option. We take a look at the different components of a cover system. So there's a section that talks about different membranes. There's a section that talks about different subsoil, and it points you in the direction of all the different guidance that exists for each of those components of a cover system. It takes a look at design. So cover system design is really variable. It can be as simple as 2 strips of soil, like just put the subsoil and then the topsoil on top. But some sites have changes in site level. There's a question of what happens at the boundary of the site, because it's quite difficult to have a steep 600mm wall that you neatly put some soil into. And those boundaries around gardens can be really important, because quite often if you think about a flower bed, it's around the edge underneath your fence. And that quite often is where a reduced cover system thickness might be present just because of the excavation techniques. Depending on where you are in the country, if you are in a coal mining area, you might particularly have some combustible material. And obviously lots of sites have issues with trees and root protection zones, and how cover systems integrate with those root protection zones, making sure that trees can remain on site and that the contamination risk is effectively addressed. We take a look at cover system design depths. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. And we take a look at verification. So we take a look at what needs to be included in verification reports. We have a discussion about regional variations. So if some of you are part of YALPAG, there's a YALPAG document. Different local authorities produce their own verification guidance. At Sheffield, I have the YALPAG guidance that I put on the Sheffield website. But I also have a separate piece of Sheffield specific guidance that says how many trial holes we might expect for verification, and that they need to be in the front and back gardens. And that's a specific Sheffield document that I have. So different local authorities will have different guidance documents. Those warranty provider requirements that Mark has so helpfully gone through for us, which may be slightly different to the local authority requirements, just because we, as Fabia went through at the beginning, we exist for different reasons. We're here to regulate, and there is a warranty provider. So sometimes what we need out of the verification document can be ever so slightly different. And also depth requirements. So thinking back, one thing that I know is we had a lot of discussions about when we were writing the document was putting a pipe down and then using that as a trial hole for verification. And there are some local authorities that will not accept that as a medium of trial pit verification, just because the construction methodology means you can build up soil around that pipe, and it might not be representative of the actual depth across the entire plot. So it's kind of being aware that it's not necessarily one size fits all for verification. I can't talk about cover systems without talking about BRE 465. So Emma talked about the 600mm double digging depth. BRE 465 itself also includes modelling software for calculating depth of cover. And that's a mathematical model that works on the assumption that there will ultimately be complete mixing and dilution between the contaminated layer underneath and within the cover layer. And that assumption is something that isn't appropriate on a large number of sites. We've been moving away from the idea of dilution for a long time. The 600mm value is routinely proposed without any justification as to why that 600mm is appropriate for this site. It may provide a line of evidence for certain sites, and it's just not really widely accepted as standard among local authority regulators. So if you are a consultant looking at using BRE 465, I would really advise agreeing that at the outset. There is an AGS position statement about the applicability of BRE 465, and it's not hugely long, and it's a really interesting read if you are interested in BRE 465 and why local authorities tend to not accept it so much anymore. So if 600mm needs to be justified, how do you know what to suggest? So one of the things we did create in this NCOG guidance document is a tool for regulators to know when certain factors might indicate that an increased or a reduced system thickness might be appropriate. So for example, residential land would require a greater cover thickness compared to public open space. Or if you have asbestos fibres in the soil, a greater cover thickness is more likely to be required than if the only contaminants identified as part of the site investigation were not bioaccessible. So this is just kind of a tool to help define that thickness requirement. Different local authorities might have independent guidance about whether they accept a certain thickness, or whether they accept a certain number of samples for verification per plot or per volume of soil. Again, it's impossible for us to create national guidance that dictates a specific number for thickness or number of verification samples, just because the geology changes so drastically, the availability of topsoil is so different. So it's one of those things to be aware of. The red line is that it's the responsibility of the consultant, engineer, agent, or applicant, depending on which one is relevant, to justify the design and chosen depth of cover system. It's then the responsibility of the regulator to decide whether that justification is acceptable. So that's kind of the different roles in the procedure. So yeah, this mostly goes through everything that I've just said and that Mark said. So let's get past it to my favourite part of the presentation, what regulators want. So what we want from planning applicants. Choose your consultant wisely. A contaminated land consultant is likely to be more qualified in one area of contaminated land than another. If you require something basic, I'd say a lot of contaminated land consultants have a level of basic knowledge, that if you have a complex site with complex needs, it's best to get a specialist in that area. And there are different ways of looking up specialists. For example, Silk has a database of specialists in different areas of people who have qualified as Silks to say that they are good at that specific thing. Do the risk assessment early. A lot of local authority planning conditions give timescales, and I'd say the most frequent breach of condition I see is people moving into houses before verification has been submitted, and that is a technical breach of our conditions. So do it earlier rather than later. It's much easier to fix a problem at the beginning and much cheaper to fix a problem at the beginning than it is to retrospectively fix it later. Ask us for advice. And I've put this up here with a caveat, as in, if you are considering doing something that is slightly out of the ordinary, or you've come up with an idea or something that's not particularly standard, it's worth having a 5-minute phone conversation going, I'm thinking of doing this. Does that sound like it might be okay in principle if I can back it up? In general, local authority regulators don't have time to pre-approve your reports. We don't get paid for that sort of thing. We can't approve it once as an informal thing, and then again when it comes in under planning. That's just not possible. So, but a 5-minute phone call for non-standard things can make all the difference. For awareness, we don't reject over-specified reports. So our job as regulator means that if something is proposed that is suitable according to the guidance, then we will say yes, even if it is massively overspecified. So even if somebody came to me and said, I'd like a cover system that's 2 meters thick, in my head, I'm thinking that's not particularly sustainable. It's going to cost you a lot of money to verify. That's going to be really difficult to manage. But sure, it doesn't contravene any of my guidance for contaminated land. So sure. So it's just a kind of common sense check that. Ask permission, not forgiveness. Coming to us really late in the day going, oh, I've done this. That's not particularly helpful. It means that you might face regulatory barriers further on down the line than you would be hoping. And in worst case scenario, planning enforcement might have to get involved in that one. So that's ask permission before you do things. And sustainability is a benefit. I mean, with that thing of we can't reject over-specified reports, sustainability in lots of circumstances is really helpful, not just to the planet, but it can really reduce costs, it can reduce waste, it can reduce your tax on waste. Sustainability benefits everyone involved in the process, so the more that we can use it, the better. And what regulators want from consultants: we're not out to get you. Like, we're here to regulate. We don't have personal vendettas against consultants. We're not out to punish you for not doing things right. I know a lot of the time communication can get stilted between planning officers and consultants and agents. There's a lot of passing it down the line, but in general, we want the same thing as you, which is to do the best for the site and for the people who are either going to live there or use the site in future. All sites are different. A conceptual site model is key, not only because it helps show that process of thought and how the design has been achieved, but also because anyone who has been on site is probably more of an expert on the site than the local authority regulator reviewing the report. Sometimes things happen on site, or there might be a particular thing that happens on site that we can't know about unless you tell us about it in the report. And that's not to say that local authority regulators don't go out on site. It's more that the vast majority of reports we see just come into us and we regulate them the best we can. Another question that we quite often get is, why do regulators say such different things? You go to one local authority, they say one thing, you go to one place, it's another one. And a lot of that is because we are risk assessors, and part of that risk assessment includes professional judgment. So it might be my professional judgment that the risks have been addressed properly and there's proper justification, but somebody who is much more risk averse might have more concerns that the justification isn't appropriate or that more things need to be done. And it's all about that personal, there's a professional judgment level, and it's very, very narrow between us. And we're trying to bring it closer, but ultimately it's a professional judgment. And consultants have professional judgment as well. So a lot of the time when we're butting heads about something, it's that professional judgment that's the difference between us. Follow the risks through, be clear and concise, be really clear about what you're saying. Good proofreading prevents delays. The number of times I've received a report that has the title of a different site that I looked at the report for last week, but it's got new data in it. Just take a look through your reports, please, and take a look out for local and regional guidance. I think I've covered everything. Excellent. So yeah, I'll pop that link to the guidance in the chat, and we'll take a look and see if there's any questions.